Welcome to The Reins of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you lead with presence and influence with trust. I'm your host, Marinda Smith, business leadership strategist, sharing actionable insights on mindset, EQ, and energy uniquely illuminated by wisdom gained alongside my equine partners. Hello and welcome. Today's guest I'm so excited about. Kenny Barnwell brings a story that is gripping, unexpected, and deeply human. It's a journey of survival, of self-leadership and transformation. His story is so powerful because it mirrors the very lessons that we learn from horses. And so I wanted to bring it to you on this podcast. It's that true leadership that begins within through presence, awareness, energy, and the courage to respond rather than react. Since we first connected, I've been counting the days to share this conversation with you. I'm so excited to bring Kenny to this conversation. And welcome, Kenny.
Hey, Miranda, thank you so much for having me. I have been as well. I've been really looking forward to this.
Oh, cool. I'm going to dive right in with I would like you to invite you to introduce yourself to allow us to understand who Kenny is as the person on the other side of everything you've lived through. And I know it's an amazing story, so I'm looking forward to this.
I'll just say that my name's Kenny Barnwell, and I grew up in rural Georgia outside of Atlanta in the United States. I literally, when I say rural, I grew up on a dead-end dirt road off of another dirt road to deaf parents. My parents can't hear. Well, my mom's 100% deaf. My dad's probably more hard of hearing, selective hearing, if you ask me and my brothers. I grew up with deaf parents, and funny enough, music found me pretty early. When I was about 10 years old, I started beating on the countertops and playing drums with my hands. And in order to contain me and quiet me down, my deaf parents bought me a drum kit, if you believe it. Because, with deaf people, there's like all these other senses that are heightened. So, when I'm beating on the walls, it's like it might as well be an earthquake. And so I found drums, and then shortly after found the guitar and started playing music. It literally, I feel like it came out of me. And I bring that up. Moving forward from that, I've been able to create a career in the music industry. And so through music, it's always been medicinal. I will step back a bump there, Miranda, because when I was about 14 years old, I was the youngest of five kids. When I was about 14 years old, my parents set me down and said, Kenny, listen, we tried to wait till you're out of the house, but we're getting a divorce. And they asked me to choose which parent to go with. And obviously a hard thing to take at 14, especially when it was out of the blue. Your parents covered it up for as long as they could, I guess. And I didn't end up choosing a parent. I chose my town that I grew up in. My mom went one direction. My dad stayed in the town, but he still went to go find himself. And as my parents were finding themselves, I was kind of left in limbo, and I found drugs to meditate or to medicate myself. And so between music and finding drugs, I got disinterested in any sort of schooling you could imagine. And I started to spiral out pretty quickly. By the time I was 15 and a half years old, I ran away from home, or left home rather, and was out on my own, living on the streets, doing drugs, basically, a strung out young teenager.
Mm.
And so that's kind of taking it far back, Marindo, but that's kind of like the start of my foundation of where I climbed out of. And there's certainly a lot of things that helped adapt to who I am and change me for sure from that experience.
Mm. And so from moving on from 15, how did you become where you are today?
Well, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version from when I was about 16 and a half years old. I've always been good at finding jobs, like doing jobs, because growing up in the countryside, you really understand the worth of a dollar. That was something that my parents instilled in us as a good worth ethic, and I've always been able to get jobs. And so one of the jobs that I had, which were many, as I was a young homeless teen strung out on drugs, was I was working with this pressure washer owner. He owned this van that had this sprayer in it. and he would pick me up to be his helper every day. And one day he picks me up, seeing some sort of potential in me. He was so excited to stop by this bookstore and pick up these couple books that he had ordered. And he was like, listen, I will give you an extra bump of bonus. It was like $20 per book if you read these two books. And I liked
Oh,
reading well enough. Yeah, well, I didn't realize the seed that this guy was going to
mm,
be planting in me. And the books for your audience is Rich Dad Poor Dad was one of
brilliant.
them. Have you heard of this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Who Moved My Cheese
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
was the other
And,
book.
and just simple books. I love it because and did you know Who Moved My Cheese is probably, I think it's one of the most worldwide read books
Oh, wow.
because it's so simple and companies buy
So
it for their
simple.
employees and that sort of thing. So there, yeah.
Well, just to let you know, even as a strung out 16-year-old, that book was the first of the two that I read actually, and it planted a seed in me because I apparently had potential. I mean, don't we all? But this guy saw it in me, and that book helped me kind of stop victimizing myself in my situation based on what I had gone through with my
Nice.
parents and in my past. And Rich Dad Poor Dad kind of allowed me to think about standards in my life, about raising my standards. And so the combination of taking responsibility and raising my standards, it kind of forced me to take a hard look at what I was doing to myself and to my young life. Because at the time, all of my friends were in high school.
Yeah.
They were going through high school, and here I was, so-called being an adult, but really just having a tough time
Mm.
at choices. And I started to raise my standards. I started to demand more of myself and from myself and of myself. And I ended up saving up a little bit of money to buy a van. And I started to have a steady place to stay in that van. And then eventually I moved back up to Georgia, where I had grown up and got away from that drug culture of where I was living.
Yeah.
And in that time, I was looking for more purpose and more career type work, not just trying to make a buck type work, even though I did everything you can imagine. And I meet this lady that I was doing some odd and end jobs for on her house, and she worked in the music business.
Oh, wow. Mm.
And I was like, the music business, what's
Mm.
that all about? Like, that sounds really cool because I play music, In fact, only thing that I had with me during that whole time of homelessness was my guitar. I used to carry my guitar everywhere and I would play it as medicine.
Yeah.
And she was telling me that she had toured with like Aerosmith and Hootie and the Blowfish and all these different bands and doing tour management and merchandising. And I was like, man, that sounds so neat. That sounds so interesting. And she goes, well, a friend of mine owns a company where they hire out what's called stagehands. You heard of a
Right.
stagehand,
Yeah.
Miranda?
Yeah.
If you haven't heard of a stagehand is basically like a laborer that specifically helps build concerts and other events, fashion shows, trade shows, corporate events, that type of thing. Anytime, anywhere there's like audio visual equipment.
Sorry, always dressed in black.
Always dressed in black, blending in, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, look, there's no experience necessary. You just got to be 18 years old. I was 18 at the time. I can get you onto this call list and you can start working as a stagehand setting up concerts. And I'm like, they pay you to do
Yeah.
this?
Wow.
Because to me it sounded
Heaven.
like a dream.
Yeah.
And so I got on with this stagehand company and I got my first gig working at the local football stadium in downtown Atlanta. And I was just like, this is amazing. I'm out where the local football team play that you grew up watching. And like, there I am on the field helping set up these different concerts and stages. And I'm like, this is just so amazing. And I love the music industry because they accepted someone like me. At the time,
Mm.
I finally finished high school, getting a GED or formality type diploma, but just to finish high school. But they accepted somebody that didn't have like, technical training or certificates or anything like that. The music business, you can break into it and become a technician and engineer and designer and, a manager and all this without any degrees.
Yeah. Wow.
When I got in there, I was just like, this is unbelievable. This is a kid in a candy store. And I eventually needed to find my pathway because the way the music industry works on tour is they don't just kind of place somebody that's capable anywhere. You got to come in and figure out what your path might be. Maybe it's audio engineering or lighting design or staging or pyrotechnic. And I ended up landing in a department called backline. You
Right.
ever heard of backline?
No.
Yeah, I usually stump people on this one. Well, backline is pretty neat. Backline is the department that handles all of the music instruments.
Okay. Oh, so you're the black
And
guy, the guys dressed in black that run onto stage and swap out the guitars and things.
exactly. That's
Mm.
exactly right. Yeah. Drum techs,
Yeah.
guitar techs, keyboard technicians, that type thing. I mean, who knew it's a career path? And actually a really lucrative career path. But for me, it was the perfect career path because I mean, playing music, getting to work hand in hand with the artist, some of the production roles out there, they don't even get to even meet the artists. Maybe they build the show around them, but like backline techs work directly with them very
Mm.
intimately. And so I was like, man, this is an amazing opportunity. And so I started to focus on that and stage management. And eventually I started to actually went from that small role to production managing and tour managing some multi-million dollar tours. And I like to say I went from living in my van to then living on a bigger van on a tour bus,
On the
you know?
bus. Now, I'm interested because to me, the world of rock and roll is full of drugs. And so you've
Yeah.
come from that drug life, you've picked yourself up, you've gone where you are. How did you stay? Or, how did you cope? And how are you here today?
Well, it's a great question because it is. The old adage of sex, drugs, and rock and roll is certainly still prevalent out there, even though at least this past maybe decade or dozen years, the music industry has been corporatized a lot more. However, it's still prominently pulling on people out there. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that struggle with that out there. Listen, I mean, I wasn't going back.
Mm.
Like I was headed forward at this point in my life. I already I had kind of been there and done that at such a young age. And for me, those seeds of personal development turned into trees of personal development and fruits of personal development where I never stopped doing that. I
Yeah.
mean, I went to my first Tony Robbins event in my 20s.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Like
Mm.
I was just like constantly craving personal growth. They don't call it self-help anymore. They call it personal development, but it
Mm.
was self-help. I was trying
Yeah.
to help myself just do better and be better.
Mm.
And so one of the reasons why I actually attribute to my career being such a success that it's been is because of the fact that I was able to, be around all of that nonsense and silliness, but yet be a different type of an example of what
Beautiful.
healthy touring could be like.
Absolutely wonderful. Now, there's been a defining moment in recent years of a day in Monterey. Would you like to take us through that or the whole experience?
I certainly can, and I have been touring now for 20 years, and I have traveled the world, in a big way. I mean, 20 years, a lot of people go on a week-long vacation and they're still talking about it years later. Try traveling, 50 countries a year for 20 straight years. It's a lot of travel. I've been all over the world a lot. And again, with some massive artists, I've worked with artists like Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande and just some big Bon Jovi. And in fact, my last 2.5 years of my touring career, I was working with a band called Jonas Brothers, and I was on tour down in Mexico, in Monterrey, Mexico. We were just finishing up the tail end of a Mexican run, and we were staying at this hotel, and that was right at the base of this mountain range. Now, for your listeners, in Monterey sits in the northern side of Mexico, which is very mountainous, like Rockies type mountains. If you've ever been to California, it's like California style mountains, very tall mountains, but full of like rocks and thorn bush and cactus and aloe plants, like that type of landscape. Super beautiful. And every time I've gone to Monterey, I'm like, man, I would love to go hiking in these hills
Mm.
because hiking is so medicinal for somebody that's lived such a fast-paced life. It forces you to slow down one step at a time.
Yeah.
And also, I'm very I'm very fitness and health conscious. I like to focus on my physical and mental health while I'm on tour because tour life, like we just discussed, can be very draining, can really pull at you. And in fact, there was one mantra that I would ask myself every morning, which is something I learned from Brendan Burchard. He would always say, have you taken your meds, which is meditation, exercise, diet, and sleep. That
Beautiful.
it's really a personal development acronym
Yeah.
in the coaching space. And so I would be very active with like, hey, have I taken my meds today? Have I prayed or meditated today? Have I exercised for strength today? How's my diet? Am I going to catering and eating a bunch of dessert or eating late night meals before bed? You don't get a lot of sleep on tour. So like, am I getting good quality sleep? And I've been very conscious of this stuff. On top of that, before I got to Monterey, I had started a program called 75 Hard. Have you ever heard of that program?
No.
For your listeners, 75 Hard, they can look it up. It's by a guy named Andy Frisella, and it's a mental toughness program.
Right.
And it's basically like you do 5 tasks every single day for 75 days straight. It's very rigid. There's no cheat days, no off days, but you basically do two 45-minute workouts. One of them has to be outside. You drink a gallon of water. You read 10 pages of a nonfiction or business or personal development type book. You take a progress picture of yourself. You also have a nutrition and diet routine relative to your fitness goals. And so I was on day 14 of 75 Hard by the time I made it to Monterey. And it was starting to be kind of like 5:30 in the afternoon, evening time, couple of hours of sunlight still left. But I needed to go outside and do my 45-minute run, my 45-minute jog or something outside. And as I'm talking to my wife and catching up with my two beautiful little children that I have two toddlers. They were 2 and 1 at the time. I was looking out my window because the hotel, like I mentioned, sits on the bottom of this mountain range. And right behind me is the mountain range. And about a block and a half up is this hiking trail.
Right.
And I'm looking at this hiking trail as I'm on the phone with her, and I could just see locals going up and down it. And in fact, last couple of times I had been to that same hotel, I'd seen this hiking trail, but I never got a chance to go up there because I was always busy with doing the shows. And I was looking at this hiking trail as I'm talking to her. I'm like, man, maybe I could just go up the hiking trail
Yeah. Everyone
into the
else is
top of
going
this.
there.
Yeah. It's a locals trail. It looked
Mm.
like families and old people, young people. I saw people with like um uniforms that might have worked on
Oh,
the
yeah.
valley below because the way Monterey sits is on one side is like this tourist side of town. It's
Mm.
it's like high-end skyscrapers and beautiful hotels. I mean, there's like Gucci stores and like it's like a high-end side of Mexico, which you wouldn't think of when you think Mexico. But then on the other side of this mountain ridge is like old Mexico. It's
Where
like
the
an old
locals live.
village where the locals live. And so instead of them traveling, the 45-minute hour drive around the mountain range, they just hike up and over the mountain every day to go to work.
Right.
And I'm watching this and I'm like, you know what? That would be perfect. I'll just throw on my running clothes. I'll hike up the trail. There's like a dirt road I could see at the very top base of this mountain. I'll hike up the road a little bit, take some photos of the valley. I don't know when I'm going to be back in Monterey, and I'll come back down, finish my run, and then get cleaned up and go to dinner with the rest of my tour mates. Well, I decided to do that. And little did I know that decision would change my life.
Mm.
I I headed out, and it took me about 15 minutes to go up this hiking trail and up the road a little bit. And I'm taking photos. All I have on me is like my running shorts, a t-shirt. I had a water bottle, and my cell phone, and I'm listening to a podcast with my wireless earbuds. And I take some photos and I start to walk back towards the trailhead. And all of a sudden, this motorcycle
Mm.
with two men on it comes right up next to my right side. And it startled me. And they were yelling at me in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. And they're kind of motioning in a rectangle shape, which what looked like maybe give me your phone
Yeah.
is what I kind of went through in my
Mm.
mind. And so my instinct was, I'll just brush them off. Like I just kind of like lifted my water bottle and pointed to my headphones like I'm listening to something, smiled at them and kind of, waved and just kept walking a little bit faster, right? Like I'm good,
Yeah.
and kept walking. And then all of a sudden, one of the two guys had jumped off the motorcycle and was like running right up next to me
Oh, goodness.
and yelling at me in Spanish, motioning for my phone. And it startled me. I was like, what the heck? And I looked back to see because it startled me that he was off this motorcycle. And the guy that was driving the motorcycle had parked the motorcycle in the middle of this dirt road and was kind of jogging at me with this small boulder in his hand.
Oh, my goodness.
And he throws this rock at me and it almost hit my head. I duck. And that's when I was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Like I've got kids. I'm like, no way.
Mm.
And I start taking off running. Now in my head, they tell you things like as a traveler, like, hey, cartel, especially in Mexico, outside of city centers, cartel runs that country. I mean, I've even done shows where it seemed like the cartel was the security. Like it's palpable in
Mm.
Mexico that the cartel kind of runs that country. And so that's going on in my mind. Like, are these cartel? I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm running with my life, and then all of a sudden, another rock, about the same size, flies right by my left head and it clips my left ear.
Yeah.
And it causes me to stumble on the dirt road.
Right.
And my water bottle busts, my phone busts. I was wearing a hat and my headphones, comes flying off. And I kind of like landed on on the dirt road and I rolled a little bit. And I don't know if you've ever fallen on gravel, but like
It
it
hurts.
digs into, it
Yeah.
hurts and it digs into your hand and, my knees, because I was just wearing little running shorts. And so I kind of go to pop back up because they're on me. Now I was a good ways from them because I'm way faster.
Yeah.
I was a pretty fit guy at the time. And I go to pop myself back up. And when I did that, I got a glimpse behind me and I could see two more matching motorcycles
Oh,
with
goodness.
two guys apiece on it, hauling butt towards me. And I was just like, I'm not letting these guys take me. Because, cartel, they, disappear Americans all the
Mm.
time.
Mm.
You hear about the stories of beheadings and disappearings and just cold-blooded shootings of tourists, all the time. And I'm like, I'm not going to be a statistic and I've got kids at home.
Yeah.
That's going through my mind. And so I'm running for my life. The mountain is steep. It's on my left side. I'm on the dirt road. I'm trying to make it to the trailhead to evade them, maybe slide down at something. And that's when I heard the first gunshot.
Oh,
And they
goodness.
started shooting at me.
Yeah.
And so my instinct was to jump off this mountain.
Mm.
With all my might, I leapt off this mountain. And because I was moving so fast forward and the mountain was so steep, when I went to go to try to land, it just immediately snapped my femur. And I rolled about 35 feet and slammed right into this cactus, which
Oh,
stopped me. And of course, fight or flight, I get back up and I try to stand up, and the pain just rushes
yeah.
right through my body. I collapse again and I end up breaking my left arm. And I roll another 15 feet and slam into this thorn bush. And I kind of drag myself into this thorn bush. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, this is crazy. And when I actually landed and broke my femur, it was so loud. I heard the snap. It was
Yeah.
so bad. And I heard the crunch of my arm bone as well. And I just remember yelling out, like, I got kids.
Mm.
Like, that's what I thought about when I was flipping through down the mountain through the air. And I'm in this thorn bush and I take assessment of my body. I'm like, I can't move. I can't walk. And I'm looking at my elbows like poked out, not the bone all the way, but like it looked like it was dislocated. So I kind of snap it back into
Oh,
place.
yeah.
I didn't realize I was just kind of snapping the two bones back into place, but I kind of snap it back into place. I'm like, oh my God, like this is crazy. And I look up through the thorn bushes and I could see that the other motorcycles had finally caught up and they're all yelling at each other. All the guys are yelling at each other, and a couple of them go down to the trail that I was trying to make it down. I could hear them going down there, which is probably another 50 yards or so. And then I'm like, all of a sudden, two of the guys start trying to walk down the mountain to see where I had landed.
Right.
They didn't see where I had landed.
Mm.
I must have lost sight of them because where I had jumped was like an area of this mountain like you wouldn't be able to get through. It was just dense thorn bush, like sharp rocks. cactus plants. Like it's just not a place you would even walk through. That's why they had carved out this hiking trail specifically
Yeah.
through all of this mess. And I'm in the thorn bush waiting. I'm like, oh God, please, please. And I didn't know what to do because I was like, if I stay here, I'm a sitting duck. Like they're gonna get me. But if I don't move, like I don't know what to do. If I move, they might hear me, and all this is going through my mind. I'm like, God, please. I said, and I just cried out to God. The only thing I knew to do was just cry out to God. I said, God, please tell me what to do. Please. Like, what should I do? And right at that moment, Miranda, this hummingbird flies right in front of my face and starts feeding on this flower right in front of my face.
Wow.
And my mind, I'm like, whoa, that is so beautiful. And then in the same split second, I'm like, God, you are such a comedian. Like, what, like beauty in the chaos. I thank you, but like, please help me. Please show me what to do. And when I said that, this monarch butterfly flies right by my left ear, right in front of my face, and I hear this loud voice yelling at me that says, "Follow the butterfly."
Wow.
And I got this divine strength. I put my right hand down on the rocks and my left leg down, and I just drug myself through the thorns about 10 or 12 feet in front of me into an even denser thorn bush. And of course, it's ripping me to pieces, but there's a hierarchy to pain, right? And
Yeah.
I'm in this thorn bush, and this butterfly, who is not startled by me at all, lands inside the bush right in front of me. And I just kind of cuddle up next to it. And then I'm like a minute and a half later, one of the guys had walked around the bush that I was just in.
Wow. Hmm.
And maybe he heard me or whatever, but
Yeah.
like I look across at that moment, I'm like breathing heavy. I'm like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, like this is insane. I look across the valley and I can see the sun touching the bottom of the sun was touching the top of the mountain
Hmm.
across the valley. And I just had this innate, you know, uh, insight to just, I gotta wait till it gets dark to move again.
Yeah.
Like I can't move again. I'm like, I must be safe here for a moment. I just kind of internally felt it.
Hmm.
And I waited till dark. And to be honest with you, Miranda, that's when the craziness started. That's when the craziness
In
started.
your head?
Well, in the night, like obviously it was crazy getting shot out and leaping off the mountain and all that I experienced, but I spent 12 and a half hours on that mountain
Hmm.
all throughout the night. I mean, this was like 6:30 in the evening time when I
Yeah.
made the leap off that mountain. It only took me 15 minutes to climb this mountain,
Yeah.
but it took me 12 hours to drag my broken body down that mountain
Hmm.
to get to finally get to safety. I mean, obviously, spoiler alert, I didn't die.
You're here today.
But I'm here today. But I'll tell you this, by the grace of God, I'm here today because they were hunting me for the first couple of hours.
Yeah, that was my next question. Were they still there? And then they gave up.
Yes, they were there, and obviously I waited a good solid hour for the sun to go down, and then
Yeah.
as I'm kind of like dragging myself from thorn bush to thorn bush from thorn bush, or as fast as I could, very slowly, they finally had kind of gone. It must have been their dinner time or something, but I had this feeling like they probably had those couple of guys waiting at the bottom of the street for me.
Yeah.
Like
Had the
just wait
butterfly
for
gone?
him. Yeah, at that moment it was dark and I didn't even notice the
Yeah.
butterfly leave, to be honest with you. It's a good question. I've never really thought about it. It was just one of those things where, it was God guiding me
Yeah.
to
To this
safety.
safety. Hmm.
And the irony behind that is, it was more painful to rip myself through that denser thorn bush,
Yeah.
but sometimes life's like that, that the fix is a little bit more painful as long as you're headed in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it was really a good analogy for that. But in my mind, I knew that I was experiencing God at this moment
Hmm.
because the hummingbird, the butterfly,
Of
and the
course.
voice in my head.
Yeah.
But I started to move again, And I'm dragging myself, down this mountain, and I would get to like an obstacle, like
Mhm.
maybe like a rock to get around, or over a log or around a bush or something. And my hip is like so bad in pain. I couldn't move it. My body was covered in rashes and scrapes, and my skin was ripped off because I'm
Yeah.
dragging myself along, I would
And
have
you've
to like
got
flip to one.
cactus points in you
Cactus
that
is
are,
digging in me.
yeah.
That's right.
And are they
That's right.
pointless?
Oh, some of the cactus. I mean, I'll tell you, they definitely swelled up a little bit
Yeah.
afterwards. So I'm
Mm.
sure that there was something that was in them, but they got pushed into my skin. I mean, I was
Yeah.
pulling out cactus in my body months after.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Mm.
As the skin starts to kind of like push it out. But
Gotcha. Mm.
I'm dragging myself, and I would get to these obstacles, and I'm like, I couldn't figure out how to get over or through this obstacle,
Mm.
and I can't do it. I'm done. They're just gonna have to come and find me. Like nobody knows I'm out here. I had no
Mm.
way to contact anybody. Like they're gonna have to come find me maybe the next day and realize that I didn't show up to lobby call to go to load in the concert. And so I would give up because it would get too hard, and I would lay my head back in the thorns, maybe like 15, 20 minutes or so. And then I would get this vision
Mm.
in my mind of like how to get through that obstacle in a way that I hadn't considered before.
Yeah, wow.
And then right when I would get the vision, I would hear this voice yelling at me loudly, waking me up, and it would say, keep moving forward. And
Mm.
it would pop me up, and I would get this divine strength. I'd put my hand down, and I would put my leg down, and I would just continue to drag my body, and I would make it through that obstacle in the way that I had envisioned. And over a short period of time, my hand started to just get eaten up.
Yeah.
And I only had one hand, and I was like praying. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. I need your help. Like, please, God, And I look down, and I find this rock. And this rock was like this flat, perfect rock that fit my hand, like the hand holds on it. It was thin, round, like perfect rock that I could like hold on to and use as leverage to push myself along so it wouldn't hurt my hand.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Like
I
a
picked this
shoe.
rock up like
Heel of a
a
shoe.
small disc.
Yeah, yeah. Mm.
And all of a sudden I would drop this rock in this kind of push down the mountain, and the rock would go tumbling. I'm like, no, my rock, like, oh no. And all of a sudden, this rock would show back up.
Wow.
And this would happen time and time again. Because mind you, Miranda, it would sometimes take me 2 hours to go 15 feet,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
like not like
Mm.
very slow pace, and I'm trying to drag my body. Every inch is painful, and of course I'm sobbing. I'm so sad for my family that my kid's dad got himself into this, and I was so sad for my wife that her husband got himself into this, that nobody knew I was out here. I'm
Mm.
going through all of this alone. I obviously knew I had God with me, but this is the rock. I know I'll share this with you. I actually
Wow.
made it home. I know you can see it, but
I
I
can
made it
see it.
home,
It's beautiful flat disc rock
and
that
it
fits perfect. Look
literally
at it. It's even got the
the hand,
dents in
isn't
it for
that
your
crazy?
fingers. Yeah.
Yep. This rock,
Mm.
and like I said, I dropped this thing so many times, and then I don't know, a few feet later it would show back up.
Yeah, wow.
And so I ended up keeping that rock, but the irony behind all of this is my hotel was only a block and a half away. And
Yeah.
on the steepness of this mountain, I could literally see the front of the hotel. I could see
Yeah.
cars pulling up. I could
Life
literally
going
hear the
on.
roof. I could hear the rooftop bar up top. I could actually, because my room was on the ninth floor and I left my curtains open and my water bottle on the table, I knew it was my room. I could see my hotel room.
Mm.
Like there it was.
Yeah.
And I'm dragging myself along. I'm looking at the hotel. I'm like, okay, I can make it. Like
Yeah.
there it is. And then about 2 hours would pass, and I'd be like 15 feet down the mountain. I'm like, I don't know that I'm going to make this.
Yeah. Mm.
Like I would literally like, I don't think I can make this. And then my personal development would kick in.
Hmm.
All those times of doing the 75 hard mental toughness obviously helped me be prepared physically,
Yeah.
but like all that mental toughness kicked in the personal development of goal setting and things like that I had built my career on. I said, you know what? I need to shorten the goal.
Yeah.
Like I got to stop looking at the hotel and I need to
Mm.
shorten the goal. And so I started focusing on like the next bush. If
Yeah.
I could just make it to the next rock, make it to the next log. There was like this walled compound around this house, like concrete walled compound with barbed wire across the top. And I knew that that was on the street side and I was like headed to that direction. I was like, if I could just make it to the wall, and I would do this. And anytime that I would get overwhelmed in the mundane minutia of like dragging myself from small goals, I would look back up at the hotel and assess like, okay, I'm getting closer. Like I'm actually
Mm.
making progress here. And then when it would be too overwhelming to look at the hotel, I would switch back to the small goals you
Perfect.
know, and just kind of play this kind of balance of long-term vision with short-term goals,
Mm.
which is what I was thinking in my head. And of course, throughout that whole time, the same thing would happen. I would give up, when it got overwhelming, I'd lay my head back on the thorns or the rocks and, 15, 20 minutes would go by and then the visions would happen. The voice would wake me up, keep moving forward, and I
Yeah.
would push myself forward. And I finally make it to the wall. And this tall concrete brick wall with barbed wire across the top. And I finally make it to the left side of it because on the right side of this wall was the trailhead that I had come up,
Yeah.
which was probably like a block and a half away. It was a big compound of a house, someone's house, a gated compound. I was on the other side of it. I obviously could not go to the trailhead side because,
Yeah.
clearly they probably were over there.
Mm.
And it was probably maybe like 1:30 in the morning. And there was this another gift that happened, like the rock. There was this tire with concrete in it, and I had a pole sticking out of the middle of it. And I
Yeah.
was so desperate to get blood rushing to my hip at this point
Yeah.
because I'd been dragging myself and
Ah, yes.
I needed to try and stand up. And so I pulled myself up onto this pole
Yeah.
and I'm standing there on one leg against the wall, against this pole. I'm standing there on one leg and the blood's rushing down into my leg now. I'm like, oh, that feels kind of good. Even though there's obvious sore and pain, the
Mm.
blood's rushing down and the wind is kind of blowing against me. And so it kind of felt nice. And I'm holding onto this pole. And I thought maybe I could just kind of hold onto the wall and kind of hobble and hop down the wall
Yeah.
and I know that this wall goes all the way down the street. Like this is going to be perfect. And so I'm holding on to this wall or this pole, and I look up the mountain because I'm about two-thirds of the way down now.
Right.
And I look up the mountain and kind of reflecting on how far I had come and just the craziness of what I was going through. And of course, I'm also sobbing, for my family. And I look up and on the back sides of the houses, it looked like people had turned on floodlights. And you could hear the neighborhood dogs barking, but this time I heard like louder dogs.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm looking up there again. I'm kind of squinting my eyes, like trying to, assess what I'm seeing. And I see six floodlights at the top of the mountain shining down on the mountainside. And where I was against this wall was kind of clear. It
Mm.
wasn't like covered or anything. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden, the lights started to walk down the mountain. They started to move
Yeah.
down this mountain towards me. I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God. I was like, that's them. They're coming back after
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I grabbed the wall, I go to try to hop, and the pain was so bad. I
Oh.
just come crashing down on my left side and come smashing down onto the briars and the bushes that were there. And I kind of get my composure and I start to drag myself along the wall and with some more urgency, obviously. And I'm dragging myself along the wall, and I get about 6 or 7 feet down this wall and I come to this gully. And
Yeah.
this gully just like dipped down into the abyss. I mean, I could not see the bottom of this thing. I couldn't see the other side of this thing. And I was like, man, if I go down there, like might not make it back out. I didn't know what was down there. And in my mind, I'm like, I've seen enough Discovery Channel, Miranda, to know that there's like rattlesnakes in this area. There's tarantulas and scorpions, like this type of climate. And so I started to kind of go around it as best I could. And then I lost energy. I was dragging with all my might and I was like, I've got nothing left. I'm like, I can't even move and I cannot run dogs. They had dogs with them and I could hear the guys at this point getting closer and closer. They're all talking to each other and floodlights kind of flashing over. And I'm in this kind of thorn bush again, but it's not a very dense one. And I lay on my back, I cover the logo that's on my shirt to try and, cover the whiteness of it to get a little bit more covered. And I just cried out to God. I said, God, please. I said, please don't let them see me. Please don't let them see me. I just wanted to make it back to my family. One of the guys and his dog was about 10 or 12 feet from this bush. And I'm just praying in my mind. And I had settled to that, like this was it. They're
Yeah.
gonna just probably shoot me right here on this hill. I could hear the guy breathing. That's how close he
Wow.
was. Miranda, all of the sudden, he started to walk the other way.
Wow. And he
And
had
in
a
my mind, I'm
dog.
like,
And the
and he
dog
had a
didn't.
dog,
Yeah.
and the dog did not smell me.
Mm.
In my mind, I'm like, no way this is happening. No
Mm.
way this is real. Like, this can't be real. And the guy literally starts to walk the other way. And I waited there for about 45 minutes until genuinely him and his dog was quite a ways on the kind of other side of this kind of thicket that I was in before I started to move again. And God was just continuing to bless me. And I just kept thanking him.
Mm.
I just said, thank you, God. Like I would just give so much gratitude all along the way because it was palpable
Mm.
how much I was experiencing God. And I'd never experienced God in this way before. You hear about these supernatural experiences, but like never in my life I had ever experienced God speaking to me and gifting me and protecting me like this before. It was very palpable. And so I started to move again and I'm dragging myself along best I could slowly. Same thing would happen. I would give up, of course, and get to an obstacle and the vision would happen. The voice would tell me to keep moving forward. I get the divine strength. I'm moving forward. And finally I get to another gully. But this time I could see the other side of this gully because the moonlight was shining right through the trees and I
Hmm.
could see the concrete wall again. But this time I could see that on the other side of this gully, which I couldn't see the bottom of, it was black. I could see the wall and I could see that if I went down this gully, I might be able to drag myself out on the other side to the wall. And it looked like the wall and it would take me right out to the street. And I was like, I'm going to chance it. And so on my stomach, head first, I just slide about 12 feet down this gully and kind of,
Yeah.
slam into the bottom of this kind of thicket of branches and some thorn bushes. But of course, at this point, the thorns were nothing compared to the
Nothing.
pain I was
Yeah.
feeling. But what was so amazing was when I landed, I look over and in the moonlight was this whole patch of aloe plants.
Right.
And
Beautiful to heal you.
and I was like, wow. I was like, at this point, I mean, I hadn't eaten since
Yeah.
early that
Right.
morning, like 5 o'clock in the morning for
Mm.
breakfast. I hadn't eaten anything since. And I was so starving. My mouth was like sandpaper.
Yeah.
I
Dry.
could barely speak, so dry. There was obviously no water or anything. It's a desert type climate. I was like, this is perfect. I was like, I'll eat some aloe. And I go to reach over, and as I did, staring right back at me was this snake
Mm.
laying in the aloe plants. Like I'm
Mm.
talking like arm size snake. I didn't
Wow.
see the back half of it, but I
Yeah.
saw about 3 feet of the front of it and its head, and it was thick. And
Mm.
it was laying in the aloe leaves,
Nice.
just looking at me. And I'm like, Mr. Snake, I'm just passing by, talking to this thing. And it moved a little bit, but it never like became aggressive towards me
Yeah.
or defensive against me like it just knew,
Mm.
this poor fella. And so
Yeah.
there I am kind of like on my side. I'm trying to make it through this gully and was able to crack off some aloe, rub it on my wounds, but also eat it.
Hmm.
And the nourishment from the aloe was so amazing, except the fact that I think aloe must have some sort of protective mechanism because it just dried my mouth out like
It is very
crazy.
drying. Exactly. Yes. So I was
It's
wondering about that.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, the gel, like I said, I ate the fruit of it,
Yeah.
but boy, it like completely made my mouth almost even more dry than before. But it was nourishing enough to give me some energy that I needed. And so Miranda, it took me probably 3 hours to make it on the other side of that gully
Wow.
and to get out of there past that snake. And so I finally make it to the wall and I'm like dragging myself along the wall. And another gift I was given was this 5 gallon bucket
Ah,
that was like sitting along the wall that I was able to kind of sit down on to give myself some relief.
yeah.
That was another gift. And by this point, I'm like really close to the street level. And in fact, the sun wasn't high in the sky or anything, but at this point it was probably like 5:30 in the morning. So it was like
Yeah.
morning light was
Yes.
happening. And in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like, man, I was trying to get off this mountain before morning because I didn't know what was down there
Yeah.
waiting for me. You can imagine. And so I ended up dragging myself along the wall. And finally, I was at the last 12 feet of this mountain. And the last 12 feet of this mountain was like this grassy hill, like really tall, like 3 foot tall grass.
Right. Okay.
And I was really thick grass. And I'm trying to push it to the side and it's kind of cutting me. I'm like, man, and it's a very steep kind of hill that kind of finalizes onto the sidewalk. And some cars were passing by on the bottom side, but then I look over and another gift. I get this like Tupperware bin that was like half of it. And it was big enough for me to stick my head and my shoulders in. And I
Right.
was laying on my back and I pushed myself like a sled down this
Ah,
hill and it
yes.
split the grass for me.
Yeah.
And so I was able to make it down this hillside and finally to street level. And eventually, what I had to do as cars were kind of passing at that time, some of them I tried to call out to. And then some of them, like I was very scared and nervous when they were slowly passing by.
Mm.
I literally caught the eye contact of some of the cars and they looked at me like, nope, like,
Yeah.
sorry. And
Mm.
they probably knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
Here's this gringo flipped
Mm.
upside down, bloody on this hill,
Yeah.
dragging himself along the sidewalk. I finally crossed the road, dragging myself along the road. It took me a little bit to get across the road, and I'm on the other side of the sidewalk because that was the side of the sidewalk that the hotel was on.
Right.
But the hotel now was still another 2 blocks down, and then another block and a half kind of down the mountain road
Yeah.
to get to the hotel.
Mm.
And all I could do was just like kind of scoot and slide and drag my body. But what was so crazy, Miranda, was I got another gift. I keep calling them gifts because that's what they were at the
Mm.
moment. I don't know why, but not before it, not after it, not across the street from me, but on the 2 blocks of sidewalk that I was dragging myself on was a layer of hay.
Nice.
For some reason there wasn't a construction zone or anything. It was just
Yeah.
this layer of hay that was
Wow.
on the sidewalk and it gave me just enough kind of slide and softness
Yeah.
to give myself some propulsion. It still took me an hour
Yeah.
to drag 2 blocks,
Mm.
an hour. And of course, during that hour, some cars were passing by. I would hide from some, try to call out for some. Nobody stopped. I couldn't really talk very well because I was like raspy and,
Yeah.
went
And your
through
mouth was
in my
dry.
dry
And
mouth
yes.
very dry. And
Mm.
so finally I make it to the corner and I see this young fella across the street and he was on talking loudly on his phone on his speaker phone and I just yelled out, I said, "Hey sir, help me, help me." And finally got his attention and he kind of hesitantly walked across the street and he spoke English, which was great. And I just said, "Sir, listen, I know I must look crazy. Like you don't have to touch me, but can you please go around the corner down to that hotel over there and tell them that one of their guests was attacked and he can't walk
Yeah.
and he's up here on the sidewalk." And he confirmed with me, like, he's attacked where? And I was like, up there. He's like, by whom? And I was like hesitant of telling him, because I've got no trust at this point. I didn't
Yeah.
know who's
Yeah.
who. And so he goes, "I'll be right back." And it took him about 8 minutes before the hotel finally came with their car. But the crazy thing was, is I'm laying there in the most tense 8 minutes. Even though I know that God had saved me, I looked across the road and there was the trailhead that I had started.
Yeah. Wow.
Because every drag I was heading towards the
Towards
trailhead, the
it.
bottom
Yes.
of it,
Mm. So you
and
were
and
terrified.
terrified. There was a few people that ended up coming down that trailhead to come
Mm.
to work, but they kind of ignored me.
Yeah.
There I was laying on the sidewalk. So And of course, these people up there in the neighborhood, they probably know, right?
Mm.
That's like going on in my mind, like they probably know. And so finally, the hotel comes, picks me up, takes me down to the hotel. They give me some water and some Coke. I'm sitting in this SUV. They finally told the tour team, the manager of the tour that I was on, hey, one of your teammates are have been attacked. We got him. We need to take him to the hospital. And finally, the tour manager comes down, opens the door, and just sees me, the Mr. Positive, the
Yeah.
fitness guy. Like, oh my goodness! Like there I was, completely bloodied up,
Mm.
and it hit me. All of a sudden, this shock hits me, and I'm just sobbing.
Yeah.
And the security guy that was with the artist, they put one of their security guys with me. His name's Steve, bless his heart, amazing guy. So he got assigned to stay with me throughout this whole time
Yeah.
because of
Wow.
protection,
Yep.
and he gives me his phone to call my wife.
Yep.
And I knew she wasn't going to answer. And he goes, maybe you shouldn't leave a message like too detailed. Just, have her call you back because like you don't want to scare her or whatever. But
Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know what to say, and so I
Mm.
closed the door and I go to call her, and I was just like, "Hi, sweetie, it's me. I'm calling from Steve's phone. I was just attacked and I'm headed to the hospital." And I just broke down on the
Oh
phone, and
dear.
I'm I'm
Oh my
I'm
God.
crying in the med. I said, I'll call you later, and of course, two minutes later, she calls right back, of course. Um, obviously worried, and I can't say too much. The police are trying to interrogate me. I'm not saying anything to
Mm.
them about seeing anything of specifics. They finally get me to the hospital, take assessment, and the Mexican hospital is very nice people. They were actually surprised that I didn't die on that mountain because you have some serious arteries that run through this hip area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were like, usually when people break a hip or something like
Mm.
that, like we tell them don't move
Mm.
because you move and you're likely to
You
get an
can sever
aneurysm
the
or
femur.
something.
Yeah. Mm.
That's right. And and so they were just like surprised that I had drugged myself for 12 hours,
Yeah.
and went through that type of rigorous movement on this hip. But the artist ended up sending a private medical jet to fly me out of the country to back to Tampa, Florida, where I had lived at the time. And I ended up getting an emergency hip transplant, total hip
Wow.
transplant from it, metal in my arm, and that's when I had to start recovery. And so I know it's a bit of a lengthy story there, but that 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 obviously changed everything for me. And I attribute much of my ability of making it through it to my conditioning,
Yeah.
being resilient. I like to think of resilience as like having that deep purpose to want to live, to fight for it, as well as being physically and mentally prepared.
Some great analogies in there, like a horrific story. And thank you so much for sharing. As I was listening, I was really drawn to the analogies of life and
Mm.
being a leader and, the little obstacles, the gifts you were given and the moving forward, the keep moving forward. And so if you were to say, speak to those people who are listening to the podcast who maybe are feeling really stuck in their life at the moment, what would you say to them, if they're stuck, they're burnt out, or totally overwhelmed with what life is throwing at them?
Well, I would love to say this actually. I would say, listen, it's not if, it's when we go through things in life. Life is dynamic and it's ups and downs. You don't want to, you try to balance life and you're just fighting a losing battle. I like to integrate who I am into life, and resilience is not an action. It's not something that you do. It comes through you during these tough times because of who you are.
Mm,
And I'll tell you this, for those people, you're a lot stronger than you think you are
mm.
when it really matters most. And like God told me, like you just got to keep moving forward.
Beautiful. I love that. I really could ask so many more questions, but I do want to round it up. And you probably haven't worked with horses in the past, but if you can imagine standing quietly in a paddock with one, what do you think it might reflect back to you?
Mm. Wow. Well, you're certainly right. I haven't had the opportunity. When I think about horses, I think about majestic is the word that comes to mind in
Yeah.
my mind, just because they're such an ancient soul. And is the way I kind of envision horses, the strength, I would think that a horse would probably do the same thing that like, horses are such strong creatures,
Mm.
and they are very resilient. The things that horses historically have been able to be for us as humans in our partnership. And I think that, horses are stronger than they probably think in those moments of fight or
Yeah,
flight that they're up against. And they do the same thing. Horses, they keep moving forward,
they do.
until they can't. So,
And one of the things that the horses do, as you were speaking, it reminds me they're very much in the moment, and that's what you were. And you
mhm.
had to keep reminding yourself, come back to the moment and the smaller goals. You can't, because the bigger goals are overwhelming. And I love that analogy. Kenny, thank you so much for sharing your story with us all today. I really appreciate that.
No, it's my pleasure, Miranda, and I just am so grateful that we got to do this across the world. How beautiful is that?
I know the power of technology today. And you, I will put your contacts in the show notes. You did
Okay.
mention to me that you are a coach as well. Are you doing coaching with people?
I have been coaching now for probably pushing 700 hours of coaching event crew, specifically helping them be able to create successful touring careers. And I have been doing that for a long time. I actually had some touring crew in Australia that I've helped, among other areas of the world. And what I've done as of recently, since being off the mountain, I've really been focusing more on doing things that I feel like God's calling me to do. And
Yes.
although I had been coaching for years while touring, I recently, as of literally this last couple of weeks, have taken all of the education and my coaching and given it away for free. I
Wow.
just kept hearing God calling, saying, "Hey, listen, just give it away." And so I have a company called Spire
Hmm.
that you can go to the Cruspire YouTube channel if anyone's interested in learning more about the touring career and go through all of the classes and all the workshops. They're all on there now. And
Wonderful.
then my coaching is now not group coaching anymore or one-on-ones. It is now all in going to be as of June into a trained AI. And so if you go to cruspire.com, you'll be able to go and ask questions to our GPT that is all trained up with all things me, because
Yes.
I am now going around speaking and sharing this story of God's glory and the people's resilience and purpose as a speaker. And so
And Kenny, you've also got a book. Tell us about the book that you've got.
well, I been intending to write this sooner, but this incident only happened on in August of 2024, so it's only been around 9 months now, Miranda. And to be honest with you, you're one of the handful of people that I've been able to kind of share the full experience and story with. But yes, I am writing the book of this story. It's called Follow the Butterfly. And if your listeners are interested, they could join the wait list. It comes out on the 1 year anniversary, which is August the 24th of 2025. And if they go to followthebutterflybook.com, they can get on the wait list and check that out and read a lot more about the crazy details of that mountain experience for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kenny. And thank you for everyone. And I'm sure there's so much that we can take away from our time together. Thanks for joining me on The Reins of Leadership. Remember to lead with presence and influence with trust. Subscribe for more insights and find resources at mirindasmith.podia.com.